Okay, so we have got the results. Most of the students are just know about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Awesome. One second. Okay, all right. So the majority of the students just know the basics. Some people are okay. Awesome.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I think enough people have joined, so we can start the session. So today we have Divyansh sir with us. He is gonna take the session for Web Development 101. Divyansh sir is an alumni of LNCT 2019 batch. He was also the core team member of the first ever DSC team made in LNCT Bhopal College. Uh, and currently he is working in Local.ai, a startup in Bangalore. Before this, he has also worked in around two startups. The one interesting thing which I get to know about him is that he didn't sit for placements. So this is quite interesting, and I really want to know about this story. So let's hear it from Divyansh sir itself, that how he and landed a job from college to startups.
Hello. Hey, thank you so much for having me here, guys. I hope everyone is doing fine. So yeah, as Khushbu told, let's hear a story about me. Like, who am I, and why should you even listen to me, right? So, my career actually started back in 2015. At the time, I was in first semester, and I learned about JavaScript, and I started doing competitive coding with it. So, like, I have done like 2 years of competitive coding on platforms like CodeWars and CodeSignal, and I got pretty good with it. I got to the leaderboard. I guess my around the world rank was under 100 on both the websites. And then actually what happened in the second year, we had a competition called as Code Enigma. So it was a season two of that, and me and my friend Nishal Raj, we sat into the competition and we won. Our primary goal, I mean, the competition was in C++, and I had absolutely no idea about it. But because of my JavaScript skills, I was able to somehow get the first rank, because mainly, like, if you know a language, knowing other language is just a syntactical difference, right? So in the next year, what happened, like, we thought, let's host season 3 of Code Enigma. So the idea struck to me that why not create a platform for hosting the competition, because up until season 2, the competition was held in pen paper. So that's how my journey to web development began. I learned about Express.js because I already knew about JavaScript, right? And I basically created a web application for hosting coding. It's actually up on my GitHub if you guys want to see it. I will post the link after the session. And then it the journey just speeded up, and I learned about React.js, Angular, and quite a lot of other things, right? And what happened, like, in the final year, the placements were happening, but the idea was that, like, I didn't want to go into any MNCs. My primary goal was to go into a startup, right? And startups don't come to placements. So what I ended up doing was I went to a local startup company in Bhopal, Hacker Kernel, and I was the web developer there. intern over there, and I learned about Angular. I single-handedly handled the client's website and got to learn quite a lot of things over there. Then moving some time ahead, it's the final exams going on in the eighth semester, and then I thought like, okay, this is the time that I have to actually apply to a startup and just begin my journey just immediately after the exams, right? So I went to Angel List, found out this startup, Code Brahma, which was situated in Bangalore. And like my primary goal was to go to Bangalore because like it's the Silicon Valley of India, right? So yeah, they gave me some couple of tasks, which was related to development, mind you. They didn't ask me any competitive coding exams or data structure or anything. And frankly speaking, I'm not very good at those. And if you go to any startups, they most likely won't ask you competitive coding or data structure or anything. They will give you some real world test like create a type. So I was actually given a task called as type racer. So I had to create a web application for them in 3 hours and with React actually. So yeah, that's how I landed in Code Brahma. So in Code Brahma, I was mainly creating MVCs for clients, and that's how my journey was been to Code Brahma. But actually, a fun story ahead. So Code Brahma was actually 22 kilometers away from my place in Bangalore, and it was like seriously taking me 2 hours a day to reach there back and forth. So I decided I should switch and look for a company near my home. So yeah, I again went to Angel List and found out this amazing company called Local AI. And at here Local, we are currently building location analytics platform for companies like Swiggy, Uber, Bounce, and any ride-hailing companies, any logistic companies. So essentially, it's a platform where any company can come, give us their data, and they can see their assets, users, restaurants, everything live on the platform, and they can do real-time decisions on top of that. So yeah, it's been like 9 10 months over here, and like the journey has been like really well for me, especially because the company platform is built with Vue.js, and I had no idea about it, but like I again mentioned that if you know one language, it's very easy to pick up another, right? So yeah, that's my journey so far. Let's actually get to the session. And so yeah, why should you learn web development, right? The burning question, right? So the main answer to this is it's a very high demand industry, right? Because frankly speaking, if you go to any industry in the world, let it be ML, AI, or gaming, or anything, right? They definitely need a website for them. And day by day, internet is growing very fast, and all the small businesses are actually coming online, right? So all of them need their websites. Another reason is like it's very easy to learn, and another fun thing is like you don't actually need a CS degree. I have couple of my friends who are not from CS domain, but they just learned about this web development, and they got jobs and very high paying jobs for them. Another couple of reasons are it gives you remote job opportunities. So, fun fact, I'm actually not in Bangalore right now. I'm working from Himachal Pradesh, working remotely, having some fun and working. Another couple of things are like you get freelance opportunities a lot. Almost like it's never going to die because businesses are always coming up, and you can easily score a freelance job and get paid. Another couple of things are like it gives you a platform where you can represent yourself creatively on the internet, right? So I hope this is enough for you to get you on the bandwagon and learn about web development. So yeah, up until now, can I quickly know whether you guys are able to hear me, or am I going too fast? Am I audible correctly? All right, awesome, perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah. So yeah, when you come to web development, there are two things that you will find online: web design and web development, right? And today's talk, we are mainly going to focus on web development. But before that, let's have a quick overview of what web design means, right? So, for explaining the web design, let me tell you a story. Consider that you are a freelancer, right? And some small business come to you and ask you to create a website for them. So you don't really want to just go and start writing the code and create the website, because when you will show the website to the client, they will ask for some changes, right? And it's pretty hard to do the iterations on the code versus it is to do on the mockups. So understanding from that, essentially what you have to do is you will go to websites like Behance, Dribble. You will look up for inspirations of other websites which are similar to this business. You will create a mood board out of it. Mood board is essentially a bunch of different web designs, fonts, colors, all brought together on a board, right? After you have a mood board, what you do is you take out a paper and a pencil and you kind of draw a skeleton of the website, how it's going to look like. So in the middle, you can see it's a wireframe, right? The important thing about wireframe is like you don't have to go into the detail. You don't have to draw straight lines actually. And yeah, it's just a skeleton of how the structure is going to look like. After you are done with the wireframe, what you do is you create high fidelity mockups. These are actually the actual websites that they are going to look, but these are created not with the code, with the platforms, with the applications like Figma, Adobe XD, and all. So let's take a quick look at the tools that we get for web design, right? So as I mentioned for the mood boards, right, what you do is you go to websites like Behance, Dribble for looking for inspirations, right? And let me see if I can actually search for something real quick and show you guys how it looks like. So let's say we want to create a website for, let's just search for web design, and this will give you a bunch of different ideas how you can create a website. And essentially what you have to do is you have to collect some ideas. You have to basically steal, I would say, because in the initial stages for stealing the idea inspiration from other designs is absolutely okay. So essentially what you will do is you will get a lot of ideas, you will pick and mix and match and create your own. Then what you do is you go to platforms like Figma, Adobe XD, or Sketch, and you create the mockups. Those are again kind of similar tools which have like uh, if you are familiar with Photoshop, it's kind of similar. But yeah, so let's not go too deep into web design and let's actually begin about the web development. So yeah, taking our overview of the web development, we essentially have three things. We have front end, we have back end, and we have DevOps. Front end is basically what any user is going to see on the browser, right? And back end is what is powering it behind the scenes, what is sending the data, what is doing the algorithms, what is doing bunch of computations at the behind the scene, interacting with the database, and basically sending back the data to the front end. DevOps is like a manager sort of thing, which deals with the deployment, scaling up, horizontal scaling, vertical scaling, and everything. DevOps is a little bit advanced topic for today's session, so we won't be going too deep into that. But another analogy that we can consider is, for example, let's consider a restaurant, right? You go into a restaurant, you sit, so the dining area, the scenery, all those are front end. The backend is basically the kitchen, which is actually essentially preparing the food for you, right? And DevOps is like a manager who is going to give orders, who is going to add another waiter, add another chef to the line for the high demand. Got it? Now let's look at the basic elements of the web, right? So web may what you will see is oftentimes called as website. What is a website? Website is a collection of related web pages. What is a web page? It is essentially just a HTML document which gives our information. The information could be in terms of text, bullet list, paragraph, headings, images, videos, a lot of other things, right? Now, what is a web client? Any application which is connected to the internet and allows the user to search the server, the internet, is called as a web client. So the primary example would be the browser. So for example, right now I'm using Google Chrome, right? Another browser is Firefox, and a lot of other browsers are there, which essentially are applications running on a operating system, using which the user can interact with the internet. They can search for resources online. Another couple of examples for the clients are curl. Curl is essentially a command line application which allows you to interact with the internet. Basically, you run some commands. For example, curl www.google.com, and it will connect to the server and it will fetch you the data. Another couple of examples which you might probably not know, but when you get more into the web development, you will learn about Postman. So Postman is another such application which allows you to interact with the internet, right? Now let's learn about the server. What is a server? Server is essentially just an application which is listening to some port for the request. So as I mentioned, right, whenever you search for www.google.com, it is essentially going to some server running on the internet, and which is taking the request, doing some computations, searching on the database, and sending back the responses. Okay. Now, what is a web resource? Web resource is just a document. It could be HTML, JSON, PDF, any sort of document, video, images, right? Which is actually hosted on the web server. That is, it is present on the web server, right? And web client can actually request the web server for these resources. Now, another important thing is like the web resource can be either static or dynamic. What I mean by static web resource is any document which is readily available on the web server to be served is called as a static web resource. Now, when you look at dynamic web resource, what that means is the web resource is not actually present on the file system. It is created on the fly when the request comes to the server. So, for example, let's consider twitter.com, right? So you go to twitter.com/user/John Doe, right? So John Doe HTML document is not actually present on the server. What happens is whenever the request goes to the server looks into their database for the username John Doe, gets the data, creates a HTML file on the fly, and sends back to the client. Okay. Now, each resource on the internet has a unique address, which is called as URL, Uniform Resource Locator. We will take a look at the examples in the next slide. The IP address, what is the IP address? So any machine which is available on the internet has a unique address given to it. Using this IP address, one machine can connect to another machine on the internet, right? This IP address essentially contains of four parts with a dot in the middle, right? And what is a domain name server, right? So like I mentioned that whenever a machine wants to communicate with another machine, they want to know their address. But for humans, it's very difficult to remember the numbers, right? So what we do is there is a just like our phones, right? We have a phone book in which we don't actually remember the phone number. What we do is we search for the person's name and it returns the phone number for us, right? So DNS is essentially an address book for the internet. What it does is you send them a domain name and it will give you back the IP address. So let's see if I can show you something real quick. Let's go to DNS lookup and let's search for www.google.com. So this will give us the IP address of that server, right? So essentially what's happening is whenever we search for www.google.com, it is the request is going to the DNS server and it is actually telling the browser that you have to connect to this particular IP address. Okay, so this is what we mean by DNS. Right. The next thing is protocols. Protocols are essentially a set of rules using which two machines can communicate with each other. Okay, let's take an example. Let's say two human beings want to communicate with each other, right? So they need to have a common set of language. I mean, it is not possible for a person to speak English and another person to speak Marathi to communicate, right? They must follow the same set of language and grammatical rules, that is English and grammar, right? Similarly, in internet, two machines communicate over protocols, right? The most famous protocol which powers the internet is called HTTP. which essentially provides the feature called request response cycle. We'll learn about that in the next slide. But other popular protocols are FTP, file transfer protocol, using which one server can send to another machine some files, let's say. Then we have some protocols like SMTP, which stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, using which mails are sent essentially, right? I hope this is clear. If anything is not clear, guys, just ask me in the Q&A, and I will be more than happy to get over to the points, right? Now let's actually understand what HTTP means. So for essentially like anything that you are seeing on the internet is primarily, I mean, most probably powered by HTTP. So in HTTP, essentially what you have is the front end side and the back end side, and a request response cycle going on here. Okay. Another set of components that we discussed before is the client at the left. We have the server and we have the database, right? Now let's take an example of a URL, which is Uniform Resource Locator, which points to a web resource, right? So the first example is http slash colon double slash example.com slash about HTML. So this is essentially a static web resource. What I mean by static web resource, you ask? So it is just a file which is readily available on the server, right? So if you break this down, the URL, the first part will tell you about the protocol. The second part will tell you about the domain. And the third part is the path to the resource on the server, right? So whenever the client actually goes to http colon double slash example.com slash about HTML, what is happening is the browser is communicating with the DNS server, which is sending back the IP of the server. Now, the client, actually the browser, directly connects to the server using that IP address. It sends the request that, hey server, give me about.html from your file system. Now, since it is a static web resource, which is readily available, the server sends back the response, which is about.html, and the browser renders it. Okay. Now, another example would be for a dynamic resource. So the example is example.com slash user slash Divyansh, for example. Okay. So again, the browser will connect to DNS. DNS will give back the IP address. Client will connect to the server directly with the IP address. Now, what happens this time is this resource that the client requested for is not readily available on the server. So what server will do? It will query the database for the user Divyansh Batham. It will get all the data from it. It will create a HTML page on the fly. It will send back the response, and then the client will be able to show that page to the user. Okay. I hope this is understandable. Now let's actually take a look at the building blocks of the front end. Okay. So as you saw here, we have two parts, right? Front end and back end. So first, let's learn about the front end, and then we will go back to the back end. Okay. So in the front end, the three building blocks are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. From the poll, I know that most of the people already know about it. But for those who don't know about it, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. CSS is Cascading Style Sheets, and JavaScript is short for JS. And it is also, fun fact, known as ECMAScript. Okay. So let's understand these with the analogy of human body. Okay. So in the human body, the skeleton is kind of similar to HTML. CSS is the looks, basically your skin, your hairs, your eyebrows. Okay. And JavaScript is the muscles which allows the body to do certain actions, to do certain tasks. Okay. So similarly, in a website, HTML is just the markup. CSS gives it the styling, like let's say the background color, font color, table, anything, right? And JavaScript allows the web developer to make the site dynamic, basically making that site interactive. Okay. Now let's take a look at the example, basic example. Uh, guys, I won't be going too much into the code because this is just a 101. But if you want me to go, connect me to outside the session, and I will be happily guide you. Okay. So the example that we are seeing at the right is just a HTML file. HTML has certain tags. So this HTML tag you see at the bottom, it has a closing tag. So in HTML, there are multiple kind of tags: opening tag, closing tag, and self-closing tags. Okay, and then there are a lot of tags. Let me just quickly go through it. So the header section tells about the metadata. The title actually tells what should be the title of the page. If you guys can see my browser title, so this particular tab has a title web development, right? So this is what dictates by the title tag. Then we have the style tag. This is where we write the CSS. Now there are multiple ways to write CSS, but for the time being, let's just consider the internal CSS. Okay. So in CSS, what happens is the first thing that you see is called as a selector. Basically, you select which element on the page you want to style. Then you give the property and the value, and it will just style it for you. Similarly, when you are done with the styles, we go to the body, which is actually the things that are visible to the user on the web page. Okay, so we have a heading h1, we have a paragraph tag, then we have scripts. So this is where we write the JavaScript. Okay, like I again mentioned, JavaScript allows you to do certain dynamic things, but so JavaScript is nothing but a programming language. So just like C, C++, it also has variables, functions, and a lot of other things like DOM manipulation and all. We can go over that in another session for JavaScript. But yeah, so yeah, after all this, then comes the CSS frameworks. What are CSS frameworks? These are some rapid application development modules given for you, which have pre-built CSS for you. Okay. So let's take a look at how it works. So for example, the first one that I have opened, the Bootstrap, is the most popular CSS framework right now. What it allows you to do is write some HTML, and you don't have to write any CSS for it. And you just have to give certain classes. Actually, you don't even have to remember the classes. All you need to do is just come to bootstrap.com, go to the documentation, and copy and paste it. Okay. What happens is they provide you CDN link for the styles. Let me show you that. Essentially, they give you some CSS, which you just attach it to your web page, and you'll have all the styles. All you need to do is add the classes to it. Another popular framework is Materialize. It is again the similar kind of framework. It also gives you certain classes and all. Then we have Tailwind, which is a different kind of structure. It essentially gives you the classes, and whenever you have to create an element, you just append a class to it. Right. For example, over here, they have a class name bg-gray-200. So this will set a background of gray color. They have a p-4. This will set up padding and a lot of other things, right? Yeah. So when should you actually learn about CSS frameworks, right? Uh, Once you are done with the basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can take a look at these frameworks. But mind you, these are only good for some rapid web application development. I mean, you won't be actually using these for real world projects unless it's a side project and you just want to get over with. Because consider this, like, okay, so in Material UI, the cards look like this, right? So if you don't customize it, anyone who is using Material CSS will get the same look. So that's why, I mean, most of the companies are not going to use this unless it's an internal project or something, right? Now let's look at some front-end libraries and frameworks. Now, the before we dive into this, let's understand, why do we even need to learn about the libraries and frameworks? Why cannot we just use HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript? By the way, vanilla JavaScript just means plain JavaScript without any libraries or anything. Okay. So the main reason is when you write code with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you don't get certain features like code reusability, components, and it's pretty hard to create complex applications with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so these libraries and frameworks were created by big companies like Facebook, Google. and uh, Vue.js was actually created by a single guy and a lot of open source contributors. But yeah, so these libraries, what they provide is certain things like components, state, props, reactivity, which allows you to write very complex logic very easily. Okay, so that's the reason why you need to learn the frameworks. And almost I mean, you won't actually see any company writing code with just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Any company, any product that you're seeing on the internet almost always was built by one of the library or the framework. Okay. Now, when should you learn this? Again, when you have mastered or the basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that is when you should actually consider about front-end libraries and frameworks. Okay. Now we have three popular ones around: React.js, Vue.js, and AngularJS. React.js was built by Facebook. Vue.js was built by Evans Yu, who was a ex-team member who created Angular. Okay. Now, depend. Another thing is like which one should you learn first? Okay. So this also depends on the situation, but so let's say if you want to get to an enterprise company like MNCs, they are most probably going to use Angular. Okay. Any startup that you see is probably going to use React.js, and also it depends on which company you want to go to, right? So, for example, if you want to go to Google, Google is not probably not going to use React.js because React.js is Facebook's library. They are probably going to enforce the developer to use Angular, right? And Vue.js is an open source project which is like currently booming right now. It has the most number of stars and most number of installs as compared to React. It has surpassed both of them. But the problem is Vue.js is created by individual contributors, right? So big companies are probably not going to use that because of the uncertainty that the individual contributor can do some fuck ups or whatever, right? So most of the companies currently are using React.js, but there are certain companies which definitely use Angular as well, right? One second. Yeah. So that's pretty much about the front end for the time being. There are definitely much more about it. And at the end of the session, I will tell you a roadmap which will help you understand what to learn at what point of time. But since it's a beginner session, let's actually jump into the backend right now. So the basic building blocks for the backend are programming language, framework, and database, right? Unlike front end, which has only one language right now, JavaScript, at the backend side, you can actually pick from a variety of different languages for creating the backend application. The first one again is JavaScript, then Python, Go, Ruby, PHP, a lot of other languages as well, right? Then each language has their own frameworks for for making it easier to create the backend application. Just like in the front end, we had React, Angular, and Vue. So speaking about it, for example, in JavaScript has Express.js, Python has Django Flask, PHP has Laravel, Ruby has Ruby on Rails, and a lot of other frameworks are there, right? Then the third point is database. So there are primarily two kind of databases, SQL and NoSQL. Okay. So SQL stands for, okay, I just slipped the what it stands for, but yeah, anyways, I can just explain. So SQL is for relational databases. What it allows you to do is create multiple tables and set relations between them. And NoSQL is just a collection of documents. Okay, there is no foreign key concept in NoSQL, even though there are, but it doesn't work internally how SQL works. Okay, now which language should you pick? So this primarily depends on what your end goal is. Okay, so if you want to learn full stack development, JavaScript is primarily the best option because using just one language, you can write backend as well as front end. And another couple of reasons are with JavaScript, you can actually do mobile application development as well, machine learning as well, and a lot of other things, desktop application as well. But Python is also definitely one of the very popular language, which allows you to write backend code. Python also allows you to do machine learning and all. Then other languages are also there, right? And if you just want to get into, let's say, backend developer, backend development and data engineer and data science, you should probably consider learning Python. Depending on your use case, you can communicate with me and I will suggest you which language should you learn. Now, which database should you use? Again, it depends on the use case. So, for example, if you are creating an application which has a lot of relations between them. For example, what is a relation, by the way? So let's take an example of a college, right? A student studies in one particular class. A class has multiple students, so there are relations between them. Basically, one to many, many to many, many to one relations, a lot of other things. So if you ever have to create a application which involves relations between them, SQL is the way to go. If you just have an application, for example, Reddit, right? Mainly it has just a collection of images. SQL is probably the way. No SQL is probably the way to go. Another basic set difference is like no SQL databases are faster on reads, but not so fast on writes. So that's another point. Now, all of this is done. Where should you actually write the code? So the smallest thing is like you can actually write the code in Notepad itself, but you probably are not going to do that. So here are a couple of popular code editors. The first one is Visual Studio Code, the blue one. Then we have Atom, the green one, Sublime Text, and PyCharm. Again, the choice of text editor, code editor, IDE depends on what language you are doing. If you are focusing on the front end or JavaScript, Visual Studio Code is the most popular one right now. But if you actually want to learn backend coding with Python, PyCharm is the most popular one for that. Now, what are the next steps? Like how should you actually learn about the web development, right? So you can go to YouTube, you can do some crash courses. You can learn about the documentations. There are certain websites like MDN, W3 schools, and a lot of other things. You can take a online course. One course that is really popular right now uh, is by what I forgot the name. I actually don't know the name, but I will give you the name at the end of the session of all the courses. And the fourth one is like roadmap.sh, which I mentioned at the beginning, right? So this is probably the most important thing that you will ever need in your web development career, right? Let me actually show you what roadmap.sh is. So roadmap.sh gives you a kind of flowchart of how you should learn and what thing you should learn. The first one, let's actually learn about front end, right? So it has a lot of flowcharts. So first thing is learn about the internet. How does internet work, HTTP and all. Then HTML, CSS, JavaScript, version control, which I guess you guys have already done the session, Git and GitHub. And yeah, just follow this chart, and it is a pretty solid chart. And I have also followed this chart so far for learning about the web development. This is for front end. You have the same for backend as well. So backend also has the basic things. So yeah, even if you just want to become a backend developer, you should definitely learn about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Some sort of knowledge is always good to have. Then OS general things, language, again the same thing, databases and all. Okay. So yeah, that's for the session today. Let's do a Q&A right now. And one second, send us the questions in the chat. That Slido thing. Khushbu, can you share me the questions?
Yes, I'm sharing. Wait a second. Okay, so we have two questions right now. The first question is is it good to start a framework before getting a good grasp in the knowledge, in the language? Sorry.
I would suggest no. If you have a understanding of the language, it is definitely going to help you learn about the framework. So, uh, for example, React heavily depends on ES6. So if you don't know about the language, how to write classes in JavaScript and all, you are definitely going to have a very hard time understanding React.js. So understand the language, and one very important resource is You Don't Know JS. This is a book series which will teach you the advanced topics of JavaScript. Again, I will share the resource at the end. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Learn about the language
Uh,
first and then understand the framework.
I would like to ask, matlab, I would like to add something to it that should we learn the language like very deep, or should we just learn the basics and start the framework? Like if we want to get the task done, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
what should
that's
we do?
also what you should be doing. That's also actually depends on the situation. If you have to get the things done, get the basics of the language and learn the language on the fly. Basically, what you do is you learned about the basics, arrays, and a lot of functions, strings, and everything. When you go to React, you will see actually React documentation has this refresher for the JavaScript. It will show you all the things required for JavaScript that you need to understand before you actually learn about the framework or library. So yeah, that's also
Okay,
another approach. Just learn the basics, go to the framework, go to the library. You face any issue, learn about that feature in the language.
okay, okay. So I'll mark this question as answered. I think this is answered.
Okay.
Okay, so the next question is why React is more popular than Angular.
Okay. So there is a story about it. So when Angular came, Angular, the first version was Angular JS. Let me show you their history, Angular version history. So they did some sort of thing which kind of made it very hard for a lot of people to catch up. Let me first show you that. Yeah. Okay, so what you can see here is that the first version was Angular JS. Okay, and when they actually upgraded the Angular JS, right, they made a lot of breaking changes, which costed a lot of companies a lot of efforts for them to migrate, right? So this is the primary reason which pissed off. I mean, really pissed off. I mean, a lot of companies faced a lot of difficulties and had to spend a lot of money and time to migrate their code from Angular JS to Angular 2. So that's one of the reasons why the popularity of Angular went down. The second reason is Angular is a little bit harder to learn, and Angular is a framework. So what happens in a framework is that they provide you solutions for everything, and you don't have the flexibility to use any sort of libraries. With React, on the other hand, React is just a library. You are free to pick whatever packages you want to use, and there is a resource npm.js over where you can search for a lot of open source JavaScript libraries and packages which you can use freely. It's up to you which one you want to pick. But with Angular, you have a restriction on which one you can use. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty much answered it. Okay, so the next question is which is better for e-commerce site, SQLDB or no SQLDB?
Definitely SQL, because you are going to have to write a lot of relations. So, for example, a user can purchase a lot of orders. Uh, there are relations between the categories, there are relation between the cart. A lot of relations are there. Relation queries are going to happen. That's why SQL is the way to go for SQL, e-commerce website.
Okay, so we have a few questions in the chat. I think students have joined later and they don't know to go to this link. I'm telling again, if you have any question, you can surely ask in the chat as well, but you can also go to this link and ask the question there. Okay, so the question is doing web development with Java is prioritized in MNCs?
Uh, so, frankly speaking, no new company is using Java for web development. any company, any MNCs. So MNCs usually have what we call as customer support, and they have very old created applications. So if you are going to MNC, you are probably going to get on a project as a maintainer, and if you get to a job like that, you definitely have to learn Java for web development. But if you are looking to get into a more new company and want to build new products, I seriously don't think any company is using Java for web development.
Okay.
Uh,
So, Nitin, are you satisfied with the answer? Like,
yes.
okay, so moving on to the next question, how much time would it take for a beginner to get to be a good full stack developer?
It depends on the person actually. So let's say if you are just spending 1 hour a day, it's definitely going to take you more time than a person who is spending 6 hours a day, right? Um, but generally speaking, any person can become a good full stack developer in just 6 months if they learn about everything with a proper content, and if you especially do boot camp, which is a popular trend not in India, outside India, but essentially what you need to do is you need to get on a course. If you want to become really good really fast, you get on a course. They will give you all the things lined up for you in the classes, that you learn this, and that is going to make you a solid full stack developer. But mind you, that's not going to teach you all the things that are there. So a lot of the things that you are going to learn is with the project. So for example, I'm working in local AI, right? And we are building a location analytics platform. Up until now, I had no idea about WebGL, which we are using for the map rendering. So as you go with different projects, you will learn, pick up different things. So another idea is build as many projects as you want to become good full stack developer. Okay. I hope that this answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's it answered. Uh, no, I think all questions are covered. Do you guys
Guys,
have
if you
any
have,
other question?
yeah, just feel free to ask questions. If you don't
If
want
you
to
if
send
you
in your
want to
name.
if you want to go anonymous, you can go over the link and your name would not be shown there. You can ask anonymously.
We have some questions over here. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed working in startups. So the fun thing about startups is like you get to work in a very small team, and there are a lot of responsibilities on you. So in my current company, we are a team of 5 full-time people, and only two are working on the front end, two are working on the back end. So we single-handedly have to build the entire feature. Versus if you go to a big company, they're probably going to give you just a small component to build out. So this is the reason why I enjoy building the working in the startups. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah,
The second
that's
question is,
really nice.
another thing is like with the startups, the work culture is pretty good. I mean, you get to work remotely. Like I just came to work remotely and no one said anything. Just go, and all that matters is you do your work, you take responsibilities, you deliver on time, and that's the only thing that matters in startup. And another thing is like you get to do a lot of fun things.
I had a question also, sir. Uh,
Yeah.
this question reminded me of another question. I want to ask that how should we choose a startup? Like there is certain thing that not all startups are good, and
Yeah.
also another thing is not all startups are bad. So some have a little bad experience in startups. So how to choose a good startup?
Um, It's a little difficult to judge the work culture, but what you need to do is like, okay, so startups also fall into two categories: service based startup and product based startups, right? So essentially what you want to do is uh, get to a product based startup if you want to create a product and scale it from start to finish, okay? And another thing is like, if you just want to build services, for example, just like a freelance project, right? So what you do is, some client comes to you, they ask for certain thing, you create a project for them, and then bye bye, no more working on that project. Versus if you work in a product based startup, you are going to build it from scratch, and you will stick with that product, and you will make it as big as possible, okay? And for picking up the startups, I would suggest ki go to angel list, angel.co. One second, I'm opening this after a lot of time. Quickly show you. So what you do is, you search for the location and all, and startups also pay you like pretty good. Like, if a startup is paying you above 6 lakh, it's definitely going to be a very good company. And what you can do is, actually you can go to the company page, and they have their, let me show you quickly if I can find something. They have their work culture with photos and everything. So if you find a good work culture, it's good to go. And most another thing is like, if you like the product, then only go to a startup. If you don't like building the product, then there's no fun in the working in the startup. I hope that answers the question, Goshu.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, sir. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Somebody has asked, if I start Node.js first, uh, then is there anything that I'm doing wrong? If yes, suggest me what I do. What I do. I think
um
he's trying to ask. Okay, okay, you got the question right.
yeah, I got the question. I think what he meant is like, he hasn't done HTML CSS, and they directly jump to Node.js, right? It's not a big issue. It's not even an issue. What you need to, I mean, Node.js is essentially not a language. Node.js is just an environment. Okay, you are still going to write JavaScript with a little bit of tiny features which are additional in Node.js. So you will still learn about the language with Node.js. So there's nothing wrong. If you have picked Node.js, I think you are probably targeting backend. If you're doing that, there is, just feel free to go ahead, and you can actually anytime come back and learn HTML CSS. There is not an issue.
Okay. So the next question is, I know basic HTML, CSS, JS, Node.js and Express and plan to start Mongo. Is that right thing or should I improve my plan? Also give me some advice too.
So
Uh,
I think you are in a pretty decent situation right now. What I would suggest is, yeah, definitely, if you don't have knowledge for any database, learn about the database. That will allow you to create full stack applications. And as for the advice, I would suggest, start creating projects if you have not already, and start uploading the projects to GitHub. And if you already have your GitHub position, GitHub projects, send us a link, and we will be able to see the projects and review them as well.
okay. Uh, Vue or React or Angular, which one would you recommend for beginners?
Um, Vue is the easiest language to learn, but I mean, you can learn Vue and then switch to React. But the problem probably is going to be, there are not many jobs for Vue.js in the industry right now as there are for React. So you can still learn Vue and then come to React, but I would suggest try to learn React first, because you are currently in the college, and you will have to sit in placements and apply to companies, right? And React is definitely going to help you a lot.
Okay, so Another question. There is one interesting question I would like to ask first. Okay, which type of project should we try when starting as a beginner with some knowledge of CSS and HTML?
Copycat. Just copy other websites, other things, because you don't really have the ideas right now. And what you need to learn is right now is brush up your skills, right? So just pick a project which you find online. For example, the what we are using right now is Slido, which is giving you the ability to do polls, Q&A. You can replicate this. But yeah, since you are very beginner in the HTML CSS world, what you can do is you can create static websites. um, there is a website called as Free Code Camp, which has certain projects that you can do. We'll have to search for it, but yeah, they have challenges somewhere over here. At the end of the session, I guess they have some challenges that you can do. Hmm, we'll have to find for it, but yeah, there are, yeah, there you go. They have projects that you can do, create attribute page, survey form, and a lot of other things. But yeah, keep in mind you can always copy, and copying is not bad because you are just learning. Even if you're copying something, you get to learn how to build that sort of thing. So the next time you have to build certain feature like that, you will know how to do that.
Okay, so Amber has asked this question. I think this answered it. Do you have any other question, Amber? Okay. It did. Okay, so the next question which got like two upvotes is I am currently doing app development using Flutter. Shall I also try web development? I know basic front end and JavaScript.
Yes, definitely. So you are in college years right now, and it's all about experimenting. Before you actually start your career in certain domain, you should definitely experiment and learn about a lot of domains so that you actually know which one do you really like. Because right now, if you have just done Flutter development, when you come to JS, you might discover that you like web development more than Flutter, or you might discover the otherwise, right? So experiment, keep experimenting, keep learning new things. And this is actually the time where you get to learn a lot of things without any pressure of time. So yeah, do that, explore it. Another thing that you guys can do is try to create weekend projects. I mean, at the start of the weekend, think about a project which is doable in just 1 week. Plan for it on the Monday. Do the, I mean, do the research and everything. Do mockups if you want to, and aim to release the project at the Sunday. This is going to force you to create projects faster, and will also help you to get a lot of projects under your belt.
Okay, so I'm marking this question as answered.
Okay.
Moving on to the next question. How to master CSS in depth and should a developer focus on CSS animation or it's a part of UX UI?
Um, so CSS is definitely a part of UX UI. And frankly speaking, I am not a master of CSS animation. I never learnt about it properly. But essentially, at the end of the day, of what your job is to get certain thing done, right? So if you don't actually master it, right, what you can do is you can just search for it online. Like for example, how to do this animation, copy the code, understand the code, paste it in a project, and get the job done, right? You don't actually have to master it. And how to master CSS in depth, I would say you don't really need to master everything, but if you want to, um, I I don't think there is a track to that, but as you keep going, you will learn more and more about CSS. And yeah, if you want to know the nitty gritty detail about CSS, you can go to MDN and search for CSS and just go through the documentation and you will know everything about it.
Okay. I think what you said, sir, is like correct. Like you don't learn CSS. You just do projects and you learn it side by side. You
Yeah,
Google and you do. That's the thing. Okay, so the next question, which is upvoted by two people, is if I give my 100% to web development, then still interviewer look for C, C++ or any language like DSA and all. Okay, so
that's an interesting one. So take a look at my example. All I did was web development and some logical questions. I'm not a master of C, C++. If you ask me to write certain code, I will probably not be able to do that. And DSA and everything is also like just okay, okay. So yeah, if you are actually planning to sit on the placements, they are still going to ask you C, C++, and Java. I don't know the reason why, but if you really, really are interested in web development, just go for it. Go for directly apply to companies, cold email them, and you will still get a job. And I am kind of earning a decent amount of money as compared to other people who sat in the placement and didn't get a decent paying job because their C, C++ skills were not up to grade. So yeah, go for it and take the risk. Directly apply to startups, do internships. This will give you the confidence for that.
okay. So the next question is, what's the difference between web developer and a software developer? What is the difference in their skills?
The difference is web developer is spelled like WEB developer and software developer is spelled like that. Uh, that's a joke, but yeah. Essentially, it depends on the company. Like they are just positions, right? Any company can give you any position, right? For example, if you go to Amazon, they are going to give you positions like SDE. In my company, frankly speaking, there are no positions, and any company can give you any position. All that matters is what you write code. There is no difference in the skill sets. Did that answer your question? It's happening. Okay. So I will pick another question. You find it difficult to find a good learning resource. Um, if you find it difficult, I would suggest go with a course. Um, and I will give some resources at the end of the session, probably with a message that will be communicated with you. Go through them, and I'm 100% sure you will get something which is pretty good and easy for you to learn about. So the next question is, which one is easy to learn, Django or JavaScript? Uh, they are technically not comparable. Django is a framework versus JavaScript is a language. If a question is Python versus JavaScript, is it's kind of equal. Khushbu, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Picking the next question, is using Bootstrap a good practice rather than building things from scratch with CSS? Um,
It depends actually. So if you just want to get things done under a timeline, you don't really need to customize. Go with Bootstrap. But like I mentioned, that any company is not going to use Bootstrap. They will always ask you to write the CSS from scratch. And there are a couple of things on top of CSS that exist. Let me open roadmap and show you quickly if I can. There are CSS preprocessors, as we know about. The most popular one right now is SAS. It is essentially writing CSS, but little bit different. It does a lot of things for you. It allows you to write functions, variables in it. Do they have a proper example? Yeah. So example, you write this kind of code, you do nesting, and it will get compiled into this, and a lot of other things are there. So for the time being, just write CSS from the scratch. As you learn more about CSS, pick up one of the CSS preprocessor, which is mentioned in the roadmap as well, somewhere over here. Yeah. After you learn about package managers and all, there is a section for CSS preprocessor, and the guy is suggesting SAS. There is also another thing called a CSS architecture, which you can take a look at, BEM, which is just notation that helps you to write classes and all.
Okay, so another question, which is, does web development need a pretty nice spec laptop, just like for? Okay, so the specifications. He's asking for the laptop specifications.
Would you like to answer that? I think you can answer that.
I think it would be good if you do. I don't
Okay.
know.
Okay. So yeah, you actually don't need a high spec laptop. You can just get the job done, because if you remember, all you need to run is Notepad. If you at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter about high spec laptop. And I guess any laptop that you have right now is probably going to have a 8 GB RAM and i5 or i3, and that's good enough, really good enough for the web development. Also, you can do web development with 4 GB RAM as well.
Okay, but if you don't have a good amount of patience, if you are a very furious person, please don't go for a low spec laptop.
Yeah, because what happens is like your laptop will hang up and a lot of things. Just get a decent laptop. It's good.
Okay, so the next question is, I see if I enroll into full stack courses, it all big for about 30 to 65 hours. Starting is pretty easy, but it's hard to stay motivated till end. Any advice, please?
Yeah, completing a race alone is very hard. What I used to suggest back in the college when I was in DSC coaching to my juniors is, if you are doing something alone, you are most of the times going to lose motivation. What you can do is you can get your friends on the same course, and have some friendly competition, like who is at what level, who is at what lesson. You guys can compete with projects, you guys can create similar project and see who creates the most amazing project. So this will give you motivation as well. And so for example, someday you are not feeling like it, but your friend uh, did some X lesson and you see that it's pretty amazing, so you can probably get the motivation from friendly competition.
I think we have one question in the charts. Is this necessary to learn SAS?
um, Not necessary, but definitely, um, all the companies are probably going to use it because it makes your life easier. Why don't you want your life easier, man? It gives you a lot of things very easy to do, and it's essentially just going to make your life easier. For example, let me see if I can find an example. Yeah, so consider this situation. At the left hand side we have a variable primary color equals to this thing, right? And you're using that two times. Okay, so let's say you give the project to a client and they ask, okay, change the color. You don't really want to go and change the color everywhere. All you need to do is just change it at one place and it will do it for you. Another couple of things are mixins, which I guess I can show you if I find. But yeah, definitely learn about it. But let me show you if I can find something real quick. Mixins. Yeah. So, for example, consider this, right? What they did was they created a mixin, which is like a variable or function, right? They give it a name. They added some styles to it, and they used it in another mixin, and this has all the styles. Now, if you want to use the same styles in a lot of components, all you need to do is just add at the rate include and the variable name, and it will at the time of compilation it will convert it to just CSS. So it's essentially just going to make your life easier. So yeah, learn about SAS.
Okay, so we have only two questions left. One is, as of 2020, does front end developers also get decent paying jobs like full stack developers do?
Yeah, definitely. Also depends on what you mean by decent paying job. If you can tell us in the chat or somewhere what you mean by decent paying job, or just edit the question and give a LPA to it. I will tell you whether it's possible or not. And I have seen front end developers getting 20 LPA, 24 LPA, as you go senior level, right? The number of years experience you gain, your pay is always going to increase, and you can reach definitely increase 30 LPA, 40 LPA, a lot of money. 15 LPA, yeah, definitely you can get it. And another
Okay.
thing that I would like to mention is, um, so if you want to go into a big company, they probably won't, even if they hire you as a full stack developer, you have the skill set for the full stack developer, they will allocate you to a project and you will end up doing only one thing at a time, unless until you go in a startup with a very small team and you have the full stack experience, then only you get to work with both backend and front end. That's another point I wanted to put out.
Okay, so we have our last question now. Is web development totally different from mobile application development?
um, I don't think I can answer that question correctly because I have not tried mobile application development that much. But if we consider mobile application development using Flutter or Dart, those are pretty similar to front-end frameworks. But if you're talking about writing the native code using Java or whatever you use for Apple, it's probably going to be different.
Okay. Okay, so that's all with the questions. I think we have almost covered all the questions. Okay, so there is one more question here in the chats.
Yeah.
Uh, what is the main difference between UI UX and front end development? I think.
Okay. Okay. So mm, let me think about that. How to answer that properly? Uh, okay. UI UX are uh, more like, what do we say, features. I mean, okay. So what is UX? UX stands for user experience and UI stands for user interface, right? So speaking about user interface, um, all of us do front end development, right? UX is not a different thing. UX is part of front end developing. Whenever you're creating a feature, a front end application and all, what you try to do is you try to improve the UX, user experience, from your front end code. um, it's those are not different things. It's just part of front end developing. UI is what you see. UX is what how the user is going to experience. So for example, I can show you a quick UX example. So Google Chrome has this feature of, let's say, when you type YouTube, whatever, you see this tab feature over here. You just press tab and you're directly able to search for certain things, right? For example, I search for Net Ninja. It essentially improves the user experience by saving their time. Otherwise, what you would have to do is was go to YouTube, then search for it. So what this did was improve the user experience. It is also part of front end development, right? Hope that answers.
So, you mean, sir, that UI and UX combined is what front end development is?
Yeah, you can say that.
Okay. So, I think front end development involves a little bit of logic and coding also. Like
Yeah,
for
definitely.
yeah. Okay. Okay. So
So
this one is the last question. Then we will be like we will not take any more questions because The session is getting too much long now. The last question is for beginners in backend, which is best, like PHP or Node.js?
I have a very strong opinion against PHP, and a lot of people does, and there is a good reason for that. No new companies are using PHP anymore. Um, yeah, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to work with old companies, go ahead with PHP. Else you want to learn work with newer companies, newer products, go with Node.js. And out of those two, Node.js is going to get you more pay, more salary.
Okay. Okay, so thank you so much, sir, for your
My pleasure, my
for
pleasure.
this session.
Thank you for
Okay,
having me
so
here.
guys, please give a feedback for the session. Like, how do you enjoyed the session, or how was the session? If you have any, okay. Aishwarya says it was great. Thanks,
Awesome.
Aishwarya.
If you guys would like to know what I'm building right now in Local, you can go to demo.local.ai and you will get to see what kind of features we are building and see if that fascinates you. As a web developer, I will show you one thing. So essentially, this is what we are currently building. A lot, basically a web location analytics platform where you can do some sort of filtration and all. A lot of features. This is probably not the easiest web development thing to do, but yeah, you will get to create certain projects when you work with startups. Yep, I work in local.ai.
Amber is asking for resources. Amber, are you in the Slack channel for of DSC LNCT? Okay, so here's the Slack link. Please join the Slack server. I will share all the resources given by Sir, and also the resources from which I have learned, from where I have learned. So uh, do join the server. I'll share the resources there. Also, guys, this is the YouTube channel link. If any one of you have joined the session late or have missed the previous sessions, all the sessions will be uploaded on this YouTube channel. Do watch the sessions on this channel. Okay. Thanks, Ashwin. Thank you,
Thank you so much,
everyone.
guys. Means a lot. I hope that you guys will build out something and connect with me, show me your stuff, connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and show your stuff. I will be happy to give you reviews on what where you can improve and all. You can connect with me on this link at the Divyansh Batham on LinkedIn and Twitter. All right.
I'll share the YouTube link. YouTube link. Sorry. LinkedIn link for connection.
Awesome. Thank you.
Just a just a second.
You want me to send the links? I can do that. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, this is the GitHub and LinkedIn link for connecting to the answer. Okay, so thank you everyone. I think we are done with everything. Q&A is also over. So that's it for today's session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, again for having me here. Always happy to share my knowledge.